I'd like to call to order the Tredyffrin Township Board of Supervisors public meeting for November 17th. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Announcements. In observance of Thanksgiving, Township offices will be closed at 2 p.m. on Wednesday, November 26th, and closed through Thursday and Friday, November 27th and 28th. The Pension Trustees meeting that was scheduled for November 12th has been rescheduled to December 4th. Now we have the approval of the minutes. So I have a motion to approve the minutes of the November 6th, 2025 public meeting.
So moved.
Second. Any board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Now we go to Township business. The board met in executive session prior to this meeting to discuss personnel matters. We go to Supervisor Liaison reports. I'm going to start with Supervisor Humble.
Thank you. The Parks and Rec board was supposed to have met last week, but we couldn't meet then because the building here was closed for sanitary sewer work. So, however, I will say for Parks and Rec, we had a terrific trunk or treat event. If I hadn't already mentioned that, it was probably seemed like twice as size as last year, at least with the number of trunks being offered. And the Township Public Works did something really cute, I thought at least. They had some of the equipment there with the hay bales all around it, and kids could sit there and take their picture in front of a big backhoe, and they would think that was really cool. So as for number of people, I don't know if we had an official number. I gave out over 400 books at my trunk, so that was, I considered really a success, and we're looking forward to next year. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor Humble. Supervisor Holt. Supervisor Gussie.
Historical Commission also could not meet last week, so I do not have a report.
Supervisor Wysocki.
No reports this evening.
Supervisor Johnston Pugh.
No reports.
Well, thank you. That was quick. Now we go to the 2026 budget updates. Mr. DeRocco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'll run through quite a few of adjustments that have been made to the preliminary budget to get us where we are now. I'll start with one of the bigger changes that you'll see in the final budget that's been posted is essentially creation of a new library fund. In the past, I think I've explained this a little bit, but the library has had its bookkeeping completed by the county. There's always been a small cost to that, but recently, in discussing this with Mallory, our library director, there's just been growing frustration with how checks are cut, with some of the processes are around having the county controlling that. And so, and I discussed the change with the auditors and how we would do this. So the way we're showing it is that it's going to be its new fund. The general fund will have a contribution to the library fund. And so that is shown in our new budget, and some of the changes are flowed through in the general fund for that. So in terms of, I'll start with the sewer fund. I'll end with the general fund just because there's a little bit more, but in terms of the changes in the sewer fund, the biggest one is we had to increase the budget by $1.4 million for next year for capital contributions to Valley Forge Sewer Authority. And so that is the biggest change there. Everything else kind of just minor salary and benefits adjustments, but that's the big one. They have a 10-year capital plan that they've provided us that, we try to push back on a little bit just because we're trying to get them to smooth the capital plan rather than, again, it's a $1.4 million contribution this year. Next year, we would anticipate that's going to be lower, and so we're trying to get rid of those peaks and valleys. But that's the biggest change. For stormwater, really no changes other, again, some minor tweaks to salaries and benefits, but no change to the millage rate or anything like that. For the fire and EMS Emergency Services Fund, few changes. We are increasing the millage rate up to just under a 15% increase. I think it's 14.98. And what that's going to accomplish is for Berwyn Fire Company, the townships, Tredyffrin and Easttown are going to be purchasing some water rescue gear. For Radnor Fire Company, it's doubling their contribution from 43.6 to 90, or 46.3 to 90, a little over $90,000. For Paoli, it included the increase for the volunteer stipend as well as an additional $20,000 in contribution from Tredyffrin. Switching gears to the general fund, no change in millage rate from what we proposed. Again, the changes for the library are outlined in there. We did increase some of the revenue line items just to cover some of the additional expenses. One of the things that we do have is again, funding that is required by the state. The libraries are required to spend 12% of their budget, and it's a big complicated formula, but it essentially breaks down to 12% on material, books, that type of thing. So we are covering some more of those costs for, to balance the library budget. And so, we do feel like there's some room there in transfer tax revenue, a little bit in cell tower rental. We receive a retiree drug subsidy every year that we participate through Divot. So looking at the last, what we received this year, we found some room there, as well as in insurance reimbursements for vehicles, for land, that type of thing. We did decrease in our capital fund. We did decrease $260,000 of capital in the 2026 budget, so that reduced the use of reserves for capital by that equal amount. We did also, again, we just going through salaries and benefits updated that as well. And so those are the major changes. Those are also posted on the website in case anybody wanted to review those, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
Joe, just remind me, what were those, the $260,000 less in capital? What was that going to? What did we remove?
We removed 50,000 of it was from, we had budgeted to redo the website again. We removed that. We were going to purchase two more electric vehicles for the police department. We removed that and added one regular vehicle back in. We also removed the funding for the engineering and design of a sidewalk project on Valley Forge Road and Sweetsford.
Any other board comments or questions? The only thing I would say is I want to thank Radnor, Paoli, and Berwyn Fire Companies for all the work we did over the past couple of weeks, or between last meeting and this meeting, actually. It wasn't that long, to really adjust the budgets to meet the specific needs of the fire company. So I think that was a pretty important piece of work. And also want to thank the township for the time they put in to make that happen. So thanks. Any public comments? We had the workshop on Thursday.
Mike Heberg from Berwyn. First of all, I would like to really give a great deal of thanks to Mr. Draco, Mr. Martin, as well as the couple supervisors who were there for a while for the public budget workshop, which was excellent. I would encourage anyone who lives in the township who's interested in the budget, that's the single best place to get financial or budget questions answered. They were there for 2 hours answering dozens of questions. So any questions you have about financial matters, they did a terrific job of explaining that to the public. And there was a lot of detail offered. A couple of specific questions. I noticed this library fund issue, which I think is relatively new. And I guess I wonder what's the reason why we're not categorizing the library as a department as opposed to a fund? And do you want to answer that? Thanks.
Yeah, so essentially it breaks down to when the library was first formed, it technically was a separate entity way back when. It's then since folded under. And then it's not, because of the way it's funded through the county, through the state, it should be essentially the auditors, it came down to whether or not it was going to be a component unit, which would have been similar to how we used to handle TTMA, where it's within the broad scope, but it's a separate, and so that's where we landed.
Okay, yeah, I'm just looking around the corner and wondering whether this is a step toward the idea of having, especially given the potential capital needs that have been described, the idea of having a library tax in addition to a fire tax and a stormwater tax and a general fund tax. So I don't know whether that's where this is headed, but I suppose that this structure would at least permit that. I also had a question about the...
Mike, I can, just to address that really quickly. I mean, I think we've said a couple times that we're going to have a pretty extensive conversation next year about how we fund the library and what we do with the library. Mm-hmm. And I think part of that conversation will certainly be, do we need to have a library tax, or how do we fund the thing, right? I don't think we did this specifically to facilitate that as a next step. Mm-hmm. But that is we're promising the public a pretty extensive conversation next year on how the library is funded and what we do with it and how we develop it and all those things. So yeah, if that helps. Okay. I guess another question I had, which I wasn't aware, so Joe, did we not have the capital, the treatment plant capital stuff in the, that's been something that's been talked about by the treatment plant for a while, and we didn't account for that in the original budget? Is that how that?
Yeah, I was waiting for Len to get us that final, like what that actual number was.
Right.
And then I know we, internally, we've been discussing pushing, trying to push back on Valley Forge because their capital plan is going to require certain municipalities, not us, to issue debt to pay their share. So, we're again, while it doesn't necessarily impact us, we do agree that there should be some smoothing in their capital plan.
Right. Yep, I understand. That they were actually, as a representative to the treatment plant board, they are in the process of scheduling a meeting in the next 2 weeks, I think, to finalize those numbers. The challenge is that we can't really, we don't have a lot of power to object to the expenditures other than for quote unquote sound engineering reasons. So I suppose that the other participants could hire their own engineers and go out and evaluate the projects that have been proposed. It hasn't gotten to that point yet, but I just wasn't aware. And of course, if the sale capacity transaction does happen early next year, then that would reduce our percentage of whatever capital is required in 2026 and beyond, which would be good news. I guess the other thing that I would just mention relative to the budget, one of the things that came out of the budget workshop is that it doesn't appear that there's about $2 million, I think, left in bond proceeds from the 2019 and 2024 issuances. So it appears that we're going to need, in order to fulfill anything beyond a couple $1 million that's in the capital plan over the next several years, that we are going to have to use reserves in combination with potentially a bond issuance. Is there any potential timetable for that or thought around that?
So I think one of the things that Bill and I had talked about is trying to, again, work with the board to really narrow down those projects, but also, again, now that we finally have a federal budget and a state budget, hopefully we'll be able to see what grant opportunities are out there as well. But one of the challenges that the board tasked us with, from prelim to now, is really thinking about on the staff level, like when we're proposing these projects, making those tough decisions on the projects that, the community as a whole, definitely needs and deserves versus the ones that we know would, obviously benefit the community, but, aren't an absolute must. And so we're going to be working on that as well to start, whittling it down a little bit more and more until we get that core. And then at that point, we'll look at funding and, I would anticipate, again, with the library discussion and some of the other things that we have to, that we're aware of, that just haven't completed that full financial analysis process to then come to the board with a recommendation on whether or not we need to, when and if we need to issue bonds.
Okay, thanks. One last question, which maybe I missed. The fire tax increase is just under 15%. Was that like around 11 in the first iteration of the budget? Is that up from what it was
Yes,
a
it's
few weeks ago?
definitely more. It's definitely more. I would say 11, 12 the first time around. What was it?
It's like 11.4%,
Yeah.
up to 14, I think, .98. So the increase overall from prelim to now is like another $1.87 to the tax increase.
So what's the overall percentage tax
Overall,
increase
it
for
will be,
26 over 25?
3.37.
3.37. Okay. All right, thank you. And again, appreciate it to the folks who put on the budget workshop. It was very worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Joe, quick question. Back to Valley Forge and the pedestrian improvements. How much were they and what were they supposed to do? I feel like I missed this.
It was, in the 5-year plan, we removed $360,000 for engineering the sidewalks from the middle school down to Gateway, and then Gateway or up Swedesford under to try to connect to the trail.
So we didn't have improvements, are there? This is for that
So
study?
we had a grant, we just completed a project that we received grant funding for to cut in the ADA ramps as well as upgrade the signals. This would have been the next phase of that. We are submitting the grant it's for construction, but the plan at that point is if we're successful in the grant, then we'll discuss the project again with the board, but normally we take that full step and that full leap to engineer and design projects. That was one of the projects that we've identified that is we would love to do it, but it's not completely necessary to do at this point.
So I want to be really specific on what this would do. This would be sidewalks from Valley Forge Middle down to Gateway?
And
And
then
then-
Chester Valley Trail.
And this would be the study for it? the
No,
preliminary design
it
for
would be we're done the study, we know where they would go. We already have the ADA ramps cut in along the way. This would be actual connections now. And then on the other side of Gateway, going around to the trail.
And how much would that cost? How much are we taking out?
So that's a multi-million-dollar total project. The construction is obviously the significant portion of that, but the engineering and design of those sidewalks was $360,000 in the 5-year plan.
And to be
I
clear,
was just getting confused because you
I
said.
might be able to help clarify. So we're applying for a very highly competitive construction grant for the construction portion. And we won't know that until next year, if and when they announce it. We know how delayed they were from the prior year for other grants. However, assuming it stays on track, if we are awarded that sometime middle next year, we can then decide, if we need that money, then we can come back. You have multiple years from signing the contract before you have to spend the money. So we're kind of, instead of doing the engineering first and hoping that we get the grant, we're going to see if we secure the construction grant, then we can complete and put the money budgeted, obviously find other sources to help fund that in '27 to complete the project. So rather than doing it ahead of time and assuming we're going to get it. The timing works out well. It buys us a year in the capital plan to kind of push it back. Or if we don't get the construction grant, then we can decide what we're going to do at all. Assuming we do, then we can still have plenty of time to design it after the successful application. It's really a timing issue.
No, I was confused because I thought Joe said we were saving $260,000 from capital for in this part budget. So then, but
It was 180 for 2026.
Thank
Yeah,
you, that's what I was
sorry.
trying to get to.
Yeah, 180 for 2026.
180 for 2026.
Thank you for this explanation. I'm actually a big fan of this project, having kids at Valley Forge and looking at the amount of mass of kids on Friday afternoons that do that walk. I do think it's a great project, so I hope that we get that funding and ultimately get to move forward. But this makes sense to me, this financial plan.
Well, let's talk about timing. Like, I don't want to push it too far out of the way. So let's go along with what you think of the grant and like, if we're successful.
Yeah, assuming, I don't know when they do that, and it's every grant cycle. It will be sometime next year, we'd be notified of whether we receive the construction grant or not. And once that happens, then you have 3 years, I think, or so, depending on the grant, usually to expend the funds. So I don't know all the details of the TSA exactly, but then assuming we get it, or get notified that we're going to receive this grant, we can then plan for 27 to do the engineering and design, start that, or as soon as whenever we want to start spending it, but then we have time to budget for it, and then build the construction costs with the grant.
Well, do we want to budget for it, not use it, and wait until we receive the grant for 2026?
Well, that's what we took it out of the capital plan, and once we know we have got the construction funding funded, we'll program it in the outer year. So that's why it's not in there right now. We normally you have to budget for it and have to pay for it. So we're waiting to see if we get the grant and then pay how we're going to pay for it once we get the grant. That's the only difference this time.
I have a question. So depending on how much money comes in, are we doing this in phases, or do we have to wait till we have everything to go all the way, like to the post office and up Valley Road? Because I'm thinking, can we at least start with going from the middle school to Gateway?
The grant is for the whole project.
Okay.
So if we're not successful in the grant, then to answer your question, yes, absolutely, we can phase this in if we want, if we end up just paying for it ourselves.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Ray Clark from Overlook Place. Just to reiterate Mike's appreciation for the staff and the budget workshop. That was a very helpful for residents to kind of understand what's really going on in the budget. They went into a great amount of detail, and much appreciated. Although it would have been good to have a little heads up about this library fund thing, because I'm going through the budget before the meeting, and about page 86, I understand why the general fund has this massive reduction in salaries and a big increase in contributions. So that was...
Yeah, we were trying to get it in for the prelim, but due to the timing of how, Mallory has to develop her budget, we just weren't able to make that change in the prelim budget, or else we absolutely would have.
Yeah. Following on from Supervisor Holt's question about the change, the reduction in money going to capital reserves, and you kind of explained that, but if I look at the 5-year capital project plan, I see that the capital for 26 is actually going up by $100,000. So there's something else going on there?
Yeah, we at the request of the board, we moved all of the improvements that we had planned for 355 Chase Road over the next 5 years into 1 year. Same dollar amount, just consolidated from 5 years into one.
Okay, so that helps explain that. Was there any particular reason for doing that?
We wanted to get it done. We just wanted to get it done.
Okay. Just on the emergency services, I see, good responsiveness to the fire department's request. Is there still any kind of arithmetical algorithm that applies to how much goes to each fire company? Or is it like the requests of the fire company? How is it working these days?
It's a little, we do have a formula. We've talked about it before. It's a little bit more complicated now because of our kind of long-term.
Basically, there's a formula we're using to allocate funds between Berwyn and Paoli. Radnor's always been kind of an outlier in terms of how we're handling them. Obviously, people don't know this, but we have not historically been contributing to the Radnor Fire Company commensurate with the services that we're getting from them. And that's worked for them for a whole variety of reasons, which doesn't work for them anymore. So that's why we increased our contribution to Radnor pretty significantly this year.
Right.
So as part of this whole discussion we had over the past week and a half, is we've committed to reevaluating how the formula is run between Radnor and Paoli and Berwyn, because really historically it just was Berwyn and Paoli had a formula between them and Radnor got what they got. So we need to work on that. So that's what we're doing. But the short answer, well, it's already a long answer, is that there is a formula that works based on calls and housing values in the area and a whole bunch of other factors, but it's mostly driven by call volume is how we allocate the funds.
Right, right.
Now, Berwyn, obviously, we just helped build a fire station for them. We own the fire station. So there's things that are happening there too.
Would there be plans to, in some way, lease all the equipment we've got to the fire company, or that's just?
As part of what we're doing now is we're buying equipment and leasing it back to the fire company for $1. So we own a fire truck now, we own an ambulance now. Those are being used by by Berwyn in this case. As part of the discussion we have with Paoli Fire Company, we talked about buying a fire engine that they could use, and they would then get that,
It gets kind of tricky because those fire companies serve other townships, so you'd want to be
I know
sure
exactly.
the townships are.
We're well aware of this, Ray. Yeah.
We're well aware of that.
Yeah.
All right, good. Good. Well, looking forward to hearing more about that as you figure it out.
Yeah, I mean,
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, as we've talked ad nauseum, I mean, the fire companies, the big issue the volunteer fire companies have is that labor is no longer free because they don't have as many volunteer responses as they used to have. So they need to have paid staff, and that drives a huge increase in what their cost ends up being to provide the services that everybody needs. And so that sort of drives a lot of what is happening here. Yeah.
Arthur Zadrozny, 16 Painters Lane. I too was at the budget session at the library, and I appreciate the administration's time and the details. And I also want to thank again, I didn't say this the last time I was up here, you guys, you folks, for the time you put in. My question is a bit broader, and I'm coming from my experience serving on the school board in Westchester for a couple terms. When you're dealing with these kind of numbers, what's the overall approach the board is taking? And I appreciate, we chatted briefly about the $20,000 that Mr. Duraco had mentioned was going to be in the budget for next year to cover the anniversary expenses celebrating our nation's 250th year since the Declaration of Independence. And part of the reason why I wanted to make sure that you understood the Parks Foundation has money to contribute to that is, one, that's what the Parks Foundation should be doing, and we had a good conversation about that. But more broadly, when a number like that comes into the budget, that's a one-time number, how does that number come out? All right, you're adding 20,000 in one time. Now I realize 20,000 is small in the midst of what, a $41 million operating budget. But my point is, when you're approaching the budget, there's two ways I look at it from my experience on the school board. Administration either comes to you with their laundry list of things, some of which are great, some of which are nice, some of which are, maybe a little frivolous, but whatever. And then you decide, all right, we're going to cut this, we're going to cut that. Or does the board say, we think the taxpayers shouldn't be burdened more than a 2% increase or a 2.5% increase or whatever. And that sort of brackets the range. And the reason I ask this question is, some of you know, I would love to see an earned income tax. All right, maybe I'm one of the few. And I'm not going to argue for it here, except one of the arguments I've heard against it is that because of salaries going up year to year, it provides more money for the board to spend without being accountable. And it got me thinking, well, okay, how are you accountable to the taxpayers for the money you spend? Where is the cutoff? Is it a % increase in revenue, or are these projects that are being proposed really important and necessary? And I'd appreciate a response if you have one, but more, I just would appreciate you thinking about that. Because I'm a retired citizen, I have a fixed income, I'm not poor. But I would like to see the burden shared, but at least I would like to know that there's some give and take and some thought being put into where these monies are coming from and where they're going. Thank you.
I mean, I would say, I was not on finance this year, but both of those come into play. What are the needs? What are the department needs? And then I know when I was on finance, we absolutely think about what percent increase is this? What does that mean? Can we get it down? Where can we cut things down and find that balance? So there's absolutely, it's not just, okay, give us your laundry list and we fund it all. It's, you definitely think hard about all of it and make sure you're being responsible with the taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, I think you've seen in these meetings the pushback we get from, I think, a small but important part of the residents, right? You know who you are, who push back on us pretty hard. And I think it's a valuable service. I mean, I know sometimes, we act like you're a pain in the butt, but I mean, honestly, we're friends. But like, seriously, it's a really valuable service you provide to push back and hold us accountable. And I think that all the people watching this, well, there's, whoever's out there watching this should really thank some of the residents who show up at these meetings and push back on us, because it does help us sharpen the pencil pretty hard. We do think about spending the money like we would spend our own money. We want the maximum value for the dollar spent. So it's not that we would pick a specific, we're not going to increase taxes more than 3%, because like we know, fire is almost getting a 15% increase this time around, and we know that the service that you need costs that. Like that's just, like we had some very good meetings with these guys, some of whom are sitting right here. And that, we were convinced, we need to spend this money to provide the service that the residents need. And if we limit ourselves to an artificial number, we would not be providing that.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we do think pretty carefully about what is a palatable number for the residents. And I think the exercise that we, if you think about two or three meetings ago when we presented that budget or the capital plan that showed us depleting the reserves in a very short, relatively 5 or 6 years, the purpose of that presentation was to show people what, if we did all the capital plans we had, what would happen to the finances of the township. It wasn't to scare you that we were going to do that, but it was just to make sure people understood that is what the numbers really would say. And that's why we've gone through and spent a lot of time and are still spending time on what does the capital plan actually have to look like to be reasonable. And that's how the decisions like, my kids went to Valley Forge Middle School. I think that's a very important project for the township to build that sidewalk along Valley Forge Road to Gateway. But you look at the numbers and you say, okay, we don't need to do the engineering before we have the grant to do the work, because we don't know when we're going to get the grant to do the work, and we're probably not going to fund the whole thing. We might do a part of it. We're not going to do the whole project without grant funding to help us. So that's how some of those decisions get made, if that helps you think about it.
Thank you.
And for the EIT, I'm happy to have that debate with you another time. I think that's a topic that's on the
Well,
report.
but I think it's interesting as you're responding.
Well, I can tell you you're wrong on EIT. I'll just tell you flat out, you're absolutely wrong. It is not going to help you. Easttown put an EIT in place, and they gave you a 10% tax reduction. That is the math at Easttown. So, 30% of the tax base in the Tredyffrin Township is commercial real estate. And we need to do everything we can to make sure those buildings are full. And part of that is making sure that we're a business-friendly community. And EIT is part of that.
All right. I'll hold off the broader debate on the EIT at that point, but I appreciate what you're saying, that you do put the effort in, and I didn't doubt it. It just struck me as an odd response to no EIT, saying, well, then we're going to have more money than we know what to do with and spend it frivolously. I didn't think you would.
We have to have these debates at these meetings, because we have every additional penny we take from the residents. Because remember, the residents have the money in their pockets.
Yeah.
They have things they want to do with that money. So every dollar we take, because of it being millage-based, we have to explain to you guys.
Right.
It doesn't just come in.
Whether it's millage-based or earned income tax-based, I would still appreciate the explanation. I'm sure you would give it to us, so thank you. Yeah, okay.
I got to say one thing. I'm going to say one thing. Where David said that you guys push back on different things, I don't know about anybody else up here, but I know I push back on certain things also. And so, everything to me is open on the table, okay? Everything. Anything that's going to help the citizens of this township possibly not have to pay a higher property tax, or this is on the table with me. I'm going to put myself out there. I will discuss everything to figure out what is the best thing for the citizens of this township. And whatever the majority goes with, in most cases, I may. But I may vote against it also, because it has to make sense. And I'm going to use this word, and people may get offended. Just because people say they have common sense does not mean they have common sense. Common sense is a word that's being used and thrown around, and it's like, yeah, okay, good luck with that. So for just me, I'm willing to discuss everything and anything that will help keep this township floating, that helps keep money in the citizens' pockets, but also helps keep money that you're not paying in higher taxes. So you may have to adjust something here and there. And the other thing that I'm going to say is when people talk about percentage rates, it's 15%, it's 20%. I'm the person who's going to say, tell me what it is in dollars. So where Joe just said, I think it was like 15%, but it was $1.87. I think people hear that better than if you say it's 20%. Was that 20% $2.05, or is that 20% $1.87? That's my, so I may be the lone wolf up here, but I'm okay with that. I will discuss everything, and we can hash it out.
Andrew Emery, President of Berwyn Fire Company. I would just like to thank the board for going back and reconsidering some of our asks, the asks of the other fire companies as well. I think that was, it's very much appreciated, and we look forward to working with the board on the apparatus upgrade and replacement programs, and then also, as we discussed, a gear replacement program in the future. So I just want to express my appreciation. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for your hard work, too. We appreciate it.
Sure.
Hello, Max Young on Hobbs Road over in the Panhandle. I'll echo the earlier comments. Thank you for all the work, for making all the information available to us. I know the budget gets more complex every year, not less, so it's great to have everything at our fingertips. I was not able to attend the budget workshop. I will say for people who, 10 a.m. to noon is hard to get away. We have these meetings at this time for a reason. To the extent in the future there could be a meeting at this sort of hour, I think you'd get more participation. I've just got 3, I hope, pretty small items for the budget. One, I just want to say for the Chase Road project, I saw that pull forward for the capital spending to $725. For those of us in the eastern part of the township who probably aren't going to get the benefit of that quite as much as those who live locally, I will say the 1.4 million we've spent so far over 2 years on that versus the Parks and Rec budget that we get in the eastern half is kind of hard to swallow. I've had this conversation with some other people, right? We pretty much have the library and we have the bird sanctuary, which I think Supervisor Humble mentioned earlier this year is kind of an embarrassment, right? The fact we're spending more money on Wilson Farm Park and Friendship Park is great, and then we drive by the bird sanctuary with the great plaque about the fireworks explosion all the time and kind of go, that's an interesting allocation of resources. So more of a comment than anything else. But it sounds like once we spend the $725 next year, that's it. It's more of an operating concern. It's not a capital concern. Is that correct? Okay, awesome. Thank you. Second one is a little bit more technical. Mr. Duraco, I think you mentioned in the October meeting the OPEB trust. We've gone from increasing contributions for the past 10 years. We're going to start cutting contributions by $200,000 initially, and then cutting more over the next couple decades, which is great from someone who would prefer to get services as opposed to sock that away in an OPEB trust. Can you walk through the math on that again? How is it we're so comfortable decreasing contributions to zero, given that the liability, I presume, is not shrinking actuarially?
So the reason we made this change in our policy and funding it is when the board established the trust in 2012, the goal of the trust originally was, again, it's to fund post-retirement benefits. We couldn't touch the trust for 10 years and 50% funded liability, which we have achieved both of them. Mm-hmm. So rather than put money in to take money out, we're simply going to reduce the contribution in as that continues to grow over time. It's not going to be an every year thing, and it won't be to the tune of, 200,000 every other year. But we do have a box around our liability. Police officers who are hired now no longer receive post-retirement benefits. That's another reason why we know at some point it's going, the box is there. We know who the last person that's going to receive retirement benefits is. So we plan on looking that again. That's a long-term strategy, and when to reduce it again and how much is going to be an ongoing project.
So the argument is essentially, we have the ability to look forward in a way that the actuarial estimate cannot, and kind of say, we know where this number is going to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, and can act today, as opposed to trying to be obsessively focused on the liability number, which might not accurately reflect where we want to be, given it's a finite liability at this point.
Right, and we don't want to, our thought was, don't touch the principal, let that continue to grow, instead of, okay, so, rather than, okay, we need to start using this trust, because again, it's $20 million of taxpayer-funded trust, so this is another way to accomplish that without, again, having to actually touch the money in the trust.
Okay, thank you. Again, I think it's great, it's technical, but the idea that, I attended the pension trustees meeting earlier this year. Supervisor Wysocki and Miller saw me there. I was told by the trustees I was the first member of the public to show up in 25 years. So it's clear this stuff can kind of get away from us if we don't check in now and again. So great that this will be gone in 20 years. No one will probably ask you about it ever again. And then last question, I don't know if this impacts the budget or not. I'm just curious. I'm really excited as a private ratepayer to see that Aqua is now part of American Water. Do any of our sewer or stormwater budget activities interact with Aqua in any way, shape, or form? Is that going to impact us? Because I know they're much more aggressive about rate increases.
Right. So other than our standard water, we have one agreement with Aqua. About 8 years ago, the township, along with our municipal partners, sold a portion of a trunk line that we all, combined, collected, and pumped through Wilson Road Pump Station. That was sold to Aqua, but we have an agreement, so the rates are already predetermined. All that is already done, so we don't anticipate any changes from when that deal closes, which I think is anticipated to be probably next year or in 27, depending on obviously if it gets approval.
Right.
So, but we don't anticipate any impact at this point.
Okay, great. Just thought I'd ask. Thank you very much.
Just to address your first question, which was why we have the budget workshop at 10 a.m. on a Thursday, because we have 4 of these meetings in the evenings. So these are, and we answer pretty much any question people want. So we feel like we have a lot of coverage in the evening, and we want to give people who can't make it in the evening an opportunity. That's why we do it.
Totally fair.
Yeah.
Good evening, Carol Clark speaking. The workshop, once again, I was the main advocate that we would actually get those up and running more than 10 years ago. So I thank you very much for handling that. And it's always so nice talking to the staff and Joe and the whole team in terms of addressing all of our questions, the Picayune as well as the grant. And we usually get a little bit more insights about the grant and the vision and the things we ultimately want to do going forward. And so there was a nice sharing of some of that information, which I always really enjoy. Also, I left my laundry list back there, but I saw a number of places when you look at the budget overall where we were keeping flat or reducing costs wherever we could, whether it was OPED or whether it was like insurance and taking advantage of those various things. So yay to our whole team to constantly be working on those types of issues. A couple minor little questions, and I don't know if you have addressed this before, but one more time. When I look at the contributions that we make to the fire departments, and there was a line that we moved out this time that was the township capital contribution, and it looked like that just ended up going back into the operating contribution. So the title, capital contribution, is that based on the user paying it from a certain source or going into a specific account?
So
Fire?
for us, in the past, the townships used to provide a capital contribution to the fire companies,
Right.
which then was restricted, for capital uses. We're changing that, that funding policy, whereas now, the townships, Tredyffrin and Easttown combined will be purchasing the capital, so the trucks and other, apparatus and other capital items going forward. So we're not going to restrict that money. That's going to just go into their general operating accounts.
Okay, but we did keep that for the Radnor. If I look at that.
Yes, because
Radnor.
we're not going to buy their trucks.
We don't buy their trucks.
So we're
Right,
going
right.
to contribute to their costs.
Okay,
So.
that makes sense. And since we're talking about the contributions that we make to the fire departments, I am glad to hear that I know it's a tough thing. How do we allocate? And that's why we need this overall organization to be really focusing in on it. But I'm glad to hear that we do have the algorithms and we try to apply it, because I was a little concerned when I was looking at the preliminary budget, and we were at that time putting in an extra $316,000 into our fire departments, but of that, slightly more than $300,000, nearly $300,000 of that was going to Berwyn. Only $17,000 was going to the Paoli Fire Department, and $1,200 of that was going to Radnor. So then when it was mentioned at a previous meeting that the various fire departments had a lot of additional requests, the Paoli of 170 to 270 for 2 extra FTEs, plus some additional things, and potentially $6 to $8 million in capital improvements. Berwyn wanted another ladder truck, put down $200,000 for that, $150,000 for uniforms, equipment, and Radnor thinking it's time to become equitable, and we need $270,000 more to bring us up to speed. And what they were saying was a fair amount. And then you went back and you re-looked at it and you came up with another $76,000 for the fire department's allotments and or increases for this year. And that came out so that I think Radnor finally were stepping up out year after year. It was 4 years ago, we were only paying them $42,000 a year. And so now we're increasing that. I felt that Paoli still got short shrift with only $47,000 of that nearly $400,000 that was added in. So I think I encourage us to go back and take their requests into consideration. I'm assuming that the group who looked at these and made these assumptions had looked at those requests. That's sort of a rhetorical question, but yes, you did. Okay, Julie. I appreciate that, and I hope you do continue. That leads me to another question. At first blush, I'm switching gears completely. I'm looking at Chase now, what are we calling it? We need a naming for that park. It can't be Picket Post, it can't be Chase Road. Maybe it is Chase Road. We need a name for that park, but at first blush, I thought, oh, that makes sense. If we're going to be making additions, restrooms, et cetera, and paving parking lots, et cetera, move it all into 1 year and let's get it done. But that's a lot of money. That's $725,000 in terms of capital funds that I don't know. Maybe another 2 FTEs over at Paoli, saving lives, is a better use of funds. I don't know. You're paid the big bucks, all 3,000 of it, to make those tough decisions, and you're working with it. But I'm wondering, that's a lot of money, and I'm very happy for my neighbors who are going to benefit from that. We're without pickleball courts or paddleball courts or whatever. We wanted to save the $200,000 from Wilson Farm Park. We put that over towards Chase. That's great. They've suffered through so much with that mess of a park there that I'm glad it's going to get done. But I have questions about the funding and think we need to continue looking creatively for funding sources. And a lot of different people have been talking about things here, and I want to make sure that we have some dedicated resources from the township working with the neighbors there to follow up on some of their ideas. They had mentioned it at a couple of the different resident meetings when they were talking about, do we invest in this or not, as way back when. And people came up to the podium and said, we're willing to put money into this. We're willing to help support this. And so I think it would be lovely if we can really actively work forward to coming up with some additional resident-funded campaign fund to help raise funds for that particular park. We do it with the fire departments, we do it with the library. We had a huge capital campaign, and there's talk between some people who are interested. They're talking with the Parks Foundation to encourage people to contribute. But I think it would be nice opportunity to really get some alternative funding in there, and the residents immediately around that park will benefit the most from it. And if we could encourage them, it's not an us versus them in terms of parks and how we fund parks, but since they had raised it meetings months ago, that we can encourage and work with them to help the neighbors contribute. And with that, I thank you.
Excuse me, Ms. Clark. When you talk about naming the park, obviously we have not yet started considering what the park might be named, but you're not suggesting corporate naming, are you? I mean, calling the park, Vanguard Park. I just think that would not be in keeping with how the rest of our parks are named, so.
I mean, it depends on how much they give.
Have an auction.
Thanks. Thanks,
Have
Cal.
an auction for that. What is the with the parks now, that going forward, how well developed is that overall plan? I mean, we typically, when we have a 5-year capital funds and we look at that, it's sort of like placekeepers. We don't know what the actual cost, or maybe you have costed out all the restrooms and the paving and all of that sort of thing already.
Yeah, the numbers that we have in the budget, Darren and our project manager, Dave, worked on, we feel confident in them.
Okay. And who's really overseeing all that? Is it moved to Parks and Rec, or is it still to be determined?
So we worked with the board and Parks and Rec, the Parks and Rec board, to develop a master plan with all those improvements. And, so at this point, should we move forward, next year, it'll come back in front of the board to, we have to develop a bid package and all that, and so that'll be back in front of the board for authorization at some point.
Okay. I hadn't seen any huge increases. Now, we've spent a fair amount this year or not for any of the maintenance?
Yeah, we've spent, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but we did all the work in-house, which saved us tens of thousands of dollars. So, we filled the pool in ourselves. Public Works has been over there quite a bit, just cleaning the place up. There's a fence around it right now, but that fence will be down, by the end of the month. And everything's, you'll be able to park there and walk your dog through the, the property if you want. But, we have spent a few dollars just getting it so that way it is safe to be on the property.
Okay, because I hadn't seen any overages that weren't expected in the Parks and Rec budget, so.
Yeah, we spent
most
most of the budget in that this year.
Great, well done for the team. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Carol. Any other public comment? Any final board comment? Now you need a motion to approve a required traffic signal easement agreement between Paley Village Shops and Tredyffrin Township. Mr. Burgo.
Chairman Miller and members of the board, this traffic signal easement is for one signal pole in Paoli. It's on the, I guess it's the northeast corner. I think it is, or the northwest corner. It's going to be to the southwest corner. It's going to move. We've had discussions with the Paley Village Shops to have that pole relocated, and they've signed the agreement. It's been reviewed by the solicitor and township staff, and we're recommending approval of that this evening. Just as a little history, there was an incident where somebody had, I guess, swiped the other pole that was there, so it's in need of replacement. So that's why we are looking to do this project.
Thank you, Mr. Burgo. Do I hear a motion? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to adopt Resolution 2025-17, approving the meeting and holiday schedule for 2026. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a standard housekeeping requirement as we move into the next calendar year. In order for us to advertise the meeting and holiday schedule for the township, you have before you the list of the township holidays and the scheduled meetings for all our boards and commissions. So I ask for your approval tonight so we can set the calendar for 2026. Happy to
Thank
answer
you,
any
Mr.
questions.
Martin. Do I hear a motion?
Motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? This is a roll call vote. Supervisor Humble.
Aye.
Supervisor Holt.
Aye.
Supervisor Gussie.
Aye.
Supervisor Wysocki.
Aye.
Supervisor Johnston Pugh.
Aye.
And I vote aye. The motion carries. Motion to adopt Resolution 2025-20, authorizing staff to submit a statewide local share assessment LSA grant application in the amount of $1 million for upgrades to Friendship Park. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I think we discussed this at our last meeting. We talked about the LSA grant for the Historic Commission. As you know, we have a grant already in for this round. We're waiting for approval. I've been working closely with Senator Committer's office and their Chief of Staff, Michael Hartman. He recommended that since, even though they do have a state budget now, they're still behind in terms of notifying the awards. Just to be safe, we should still submit one. Obviously, if we are awarded, we can notify them and they can withdraw it. But he said in case we don't receive it, as we talked about, we do want to apply for it again this round in any case. So we're just checking the box, make sure we're good in both aspects. So we're, I think, asking for authorization to resubmit the application for this coming round.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, this is a project we want to get going on. Do I hear a motion?
Motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? Sure.
Hi, Diane Van Mal, Paoli. As the chair of Parks and Rec, I am happy to hear and excited to support submitting that grant. Any grants we can get would be wonderful. I'd like to know if that would be sooner than later, as our Phase 1, which was previously discussed, is long overdue. And I have residents that are asking me, what's the timeline? So that would be an important one. And is this in lieu of the monies that have already been mentioned that could be used for Phase 1, or is this in addition to what has been spoken to?
So
It's the same exact grant application, so it'll be that Phase 1. It won't be the stuff on the other side of Friendship.
Okay, but there were monies approved to move forward with it, and we're long past Phase 1. So the questions are coming to me, what's going on? If we're applying for more grants now, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
seeking-
so we're waiting on response for, hopefully we get it. If we're successful, then that will, that'll determine, that'll be one set of bid documents that we would put out. If we're not, that'll be a different set of bid documents. We still have township money for the grant, for the project. So we'll just pick what we do. It won't be the whole project, it'll be certain things.
So the question too is, are we still on the phase program, or is this grant now just to incorporate the entire 3 phases?
I don't anticipate it getting everything done. It'll get the majority of it done. So it'll most likely still be phased, but, if we're successful in the grant, we'll be able to do a lot more of it than without it, obviously.
And can you give me a timeline on how soon you expect to hear from that?
So Bill's emailed Senator Committee's, they're really behind just because of all the budget impasse. So what we heard from them today was that they haven't even received really the information to start lobbying for these grants and doing that. So when that happens, he hasn't given us an idea, so.
So the follow-up.
But the second we know, the board will know, and then we'll be ready to go shortly thereafter.
And you'll let us know.
Yes.
I think I'm hearing, in the subtext, that you didn't mention specifically, and you didn't either, but to what extent are fees in lieu that the township received for the building of the point there in Berwyn on Swedesford Road, how many, obviously we haven't used hardly any of those funds yet. And because we can't use them as we initially thought in Tea Garden Park, are some of those funds slated to help pay for the Friendship Park?
Yeah, so
improvements?
that funding paid for the construction documents that we're pulling together right now, and then there is money left over that we're going to put towards, that's part of what we're putting towards construction.
Okay, thank you.
So is any of that money, it's me, DeRocco. So the money that Sharon's just talking about that's left over, is there money that can be used just to start, say, put the fence up for the dog park? Is there enough money there that you could take, I'm going to just say $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever, to put a fence up? Could that just be done so that in that respect, the neighbors will say, okay, we know we got to wait because there's still, the state's back and they're waiting for the big due, but we can at least get the fence up and that part will be done. And then, when the weather breaks or if we get the money, then we just, go along. Since there is some money that's sitting there, can we at least do that?
So what I would recommend to the board is that we just hang tight until we hear about the grant. The reason I would say that is you're going to get better pricing on everything if you bid it all out at once rather than in the phased aspect. But I would anticipate, just based off of all the feedback that we have, if we're not successful in this grant, that we use that money to accomplish, getting that done. But getting that done also means some of the other improvements that are in that area, like the path system, everything like that, because we do need to, make sure that once we touch that path system, we have to make sure that it's ADA accessible and all that. So, we'll look at that as soon as we can to determine, okay, this is what we're going to be able to get done, and we'll be able to get that bid out as soon as possible.
I mean, we all know this is an important project we want to make progress on. There's not a doubt about it. And let's see what happens with these grants, and then midway through, once we know an answer on the first grant, then we can see what portions of the project we can get started. So, but we all know this is an important project. This is a roll call vote. Any other comments? Roll call vote. Supervisor Humble.
Aye.
Supervisor Holt.
Aye.
Supervisor Gusty.
Aye.
Supervisor Wysocki.
Aye.
Supervisor Johnston Pugh. Aye. And I vote aye. Motion carries. Motion to authorize advertisement of the public hearing on December 15th for ordinance HR 493 to approve the Tredyffrin Township final budget for the fiscal year 2026. Mr. DeRocco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As required by our charter, we have to have a public hearing and pass an ordinance for our budget. And therefore, due to the advertising requirements, we're asking for that authorization tonight.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion?
Motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Now we need a motion to authorize advertisement of the public hearing, again on December 15th, for ordinance HR 494, fixing the rate of taxation for fiscal year 2026 for general purposes at 2.811 mils, for stormwater at 0.657 mils, and for emergency services at 0.845 mils. Mr. DeRocco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Same thing, this is required by our charter and the advertising requirements, and so those are the proposed millage rates for 2026.
Thank you. Do we hear a motion?
Motion.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now we go to new matters. Any board member new matters?
Very quickly, I've become a little distressed at the number and concentration of smoke shops in the township, and I think it's worth taking a look in when we're going to take a look next year at our zoning and kind of do a semi-comprehensive zoning review, that we look at the possibility of focusing on concentration of them, and I say this because they don't. I think there's enough of them in the township. I think you feel like you drive through the township and there's one every 1,000 feet. And it does bring a certain possible issues to folks that live around them. So I think it's worth looking into, and I just ask the board to take a look at that next year. Thank you.
Thank you, I hadn't even thought about it. Any other board member new matters? Citizen new matters?
Arthur Sadrazi, 16 Painters Lane, Chesterbrook. Wanted to raise a concern I have with the Sunday road rally events that are going on in Chesterbrook. Trust you're familiar with them, Chief. I'm sure you are. This past Sunday, about 20 to 9, I was trying to leave Chesterbrook to get on 202 southbound, and as I approached the Duportail light, I could see all the traffic congestion coming from the 202 exit ramps, and Duportail was backed up. I was in the right lane. We had the red light. The green arrow went red. Someone decided, oh, I'm going to sneak in, so of course comes in, blocks the intersection, so none of us could go forward. And it just called my attention as the traffic eventually cleared, and as I'm driving up towards 202 to go southbound, I could see the traffic ramp from 202 southbound exiting onto Chesterbrook totally backed up all the way onto 202. The bridge from the northbound lanes clogged with cars. And I've noticed this, and I believe there was may have been an accident a couple, 3 weeks ago involving some of the participants in this. I like people to have fun, just if it's a bike park, if it's a road rally, it's great. My concern is at some point, these people are going to learn there's another way to get to the corporate center by coming from 252 through Chesterbrook, and then that intersection in Chesterbrook is going to be totally crammed up. So my questions are, is there some limit on the number of cars that can participate in this? To what extent are we incurring police in costs to have extra officers on duty? And to what extent are the organizers paying to offset those costs to the taxpayers? Thank you.
The organizers have contracted, they've worked with us, and as we need to escalate to add more resources, they've been receptive to that. I'd like to be able to get more out there to try and facilitate movement and safety. It is drawing quite a crowd. To my knowledge, there's no permitting or fees that are enforceable that I know that are on the ordinance books that would prohibit it. But the organizers have worked with us, and they do supplement, so you're not using patrol function to help that event. It is being compensated, as we do with other special duty throughout the township for other events all over.
Thanks, Chief. Any other citizen new matters? The next meeting is December 1st, Monday, December 1st, and do I hear a motion to adjourn? Motion. Second?
Second.
Aye. Thanks.